Welcome to the Veterans Network podcast. I am your host, Jamie Kennedy, co-founder of Veterans Network. As usual, we need to apologise for the background noise of vehicles passing. We are recording this podcast from the office today, and our office is located next to the main road. You'll be pleased to know it won't be long now, and we'll be relocating to a new peaceful office. We'd like to give a quick shout out to Oscabi Marketing, a veteran-owned business specialising in web design, SEO and PPC, just one of many veteran-owned businesses listed in our free online business directory. So, in this episode we'll be speaking with Mr. Jordan Wiley, an incredibly interesting and inspiring veteran with many stories to tell. We'll talk about the transition from the armed forces to the civilian world and Jordan's personal experience of that. We'll also discuss Jordan's new book titled Citadel, which is a tale of his first-hand experience with the Somalian pirates. Jordan is going to talk to us about the Channel I-6 and working in the close protection and maritime security industry. And we'll speak to Jordan about his campaign called Running Dangerously in support of children in certain parts of the world that have endured conflict and have been affected by war. Let's give Jordan a call and get him on the line.
Good morning, Jordan speaking.
Good morning, Jordan. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, and welcome to Veterans Network podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Excellent. So let's just get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your military background.
Yeah, so I was like most people, I guess, in the sense that I joined the army pretty much straight from school. I wasn't the best student at school, we could say. I didn't leave with any formal qualifications or GCSEs of any value. So I come from a military family, so it was a bit of a natural transition, really, to go to join the armed forces, because I always saw it looking from the outside in. I thought it was a way that I could see the world, travel, meet lots of new people, and most important to me at 16 was to keep playing sport and football, which was a big part of my life at that stage, because I'd played football since 5-6 years old to quite a decent standard. So joining the army was really exciting. Then I joined a cavalry regiment, the finest cavalry regiment, the King's Royal Hussars. And I spent the last 10 years, the next 10 years, in the King's Royal Hussars, leaving as a junior NCO in 2009. Did the usual tours, Northern Ireland and a couple of tours of Iraq. I was very interesting tours of Iraq, although some quite difficult times out there. Obviously losing colleagues and friends, but it was certainly a place where I learned a lot about myself. And sort of, I guess it turned the old cliche of turning a boy into a man. I was involved in an intelligence cell for both of my tours of Iraq, and I was very fortunate to work with the Staffordshire Regiment, the Staffordshire Regiment and the Coldstream Guards, who I was attached to as an intelligence specialist, which was incredible. It was a fascinating tour. I was a prisoner handler and tactical questioner, which essentially meant extracting information from Iraqi suspected sort of prisoners and terrorists, which was incredible, really, and a great learning experience. Travelled the world on exercises, as most soldiers do, to places like Poland, Germany. Spent a lot of time in Canada on obviously Challenger 2 main battle tank exercises. And then when I was in the UK, if I weren't down in the local pub, would be probably on exercise on Salisbury Plain or somewhere, because we were based down in Tidworth. So yeah, that was my sort of military career, if you like. I guess one of the things that was a bit different about my personal journey was that I was a rejoiner as well. So after 5 years in the army, I decided I'd had enough, and mainly after the first tour of Iraq, we lost some good guys, and it hit me quite hard. And I thought, you know what, I got to go and do something else now. And I decided to leave the army, and I lasted about 4 months outside. And I can remember very clearly that I was stood on. I'm from Blackpool, as you might have guessed, with a northern accent, but I remember being stood on the Tesco Superstore car park barrier as a security guard in 2005, and my job for 12 hours a day was literally just to press the barrier and check cars coming in. And it was no disrespect to anybody who's in that, but for me, coming from the military, it was quite hard to accept that's what I was doing at the time. And I decided to rejoin the army, but this time, unlike the first time, I I was going to join with a plan to leave again, but I was going to educate myself. I was going to gain some qualifications in my second sort of stint in the military, and that's exactly what I did, using all the resources available. So yeah, that's what I've done. And then I left did another 5 years, and then left in 2009.
So you've had a very experienced military career, be it in 2 stages. But you speak that you had some struggles when you came out into Civvy Street. Now they sound like familiar struggles that, I mean, I've written about it in the past in previous Veterans Network Veterans Network blogs. What was it that you found most challenging about the transition from soldier to civilian in both occasions?
I think for me, one of the things that the military sort of gives you and ingrains into you is that you're part of something quite unique and quite special. You're in a sort of club, if you like, and you're very proud to put on that uniform. And sometimes I think when you're a soldier, you take that for granted. I can remember, going on parade when I was a soldier, and it used to be a bit of a pain because you knew you'd be polishing your boots for days before, you'd be brushing off the medals, and actually you took it for granted. But the moment you step out of military life into civilian life, you sort of realise quite quickly how important and how proud you actually were to wear the Queen's uniform and put those medals on a parade. And I guess that's why you see lots of veterans on parade in their thousands on remembrance services and Armed Forces Day, because they cling on to what they were proud of, and that club, that unique special group of people that they belong to. And I think that hits you quite hard, the fact that you were doing a very worthwhile job, you were respected by the general public, and then all of a sudden you're just another sort of a bod in the system, I guess, to a certain extent. And I think that's quite hard to accept for a lot of people, especially, I think, even more so the people who spend full careers in the army, who that's all they really know from 16 to sort of 40, 50 years old, and they don't know anything else. I think that the longer you stay in the services, the even more difficult that becomes. Because
you can become institutionalised, don't you? So, like, for myself, I joined at 16, so I was institutionalised in school. I left school, and then I went straight into another institutionalisation, which was the army. So, without having any experience of actual real civilian life, and that, I believe, made it even more difficult when leaving the armed forces.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I definitely learned the first time leaving to the second time is that the world doesn't owe you a favour, and nobody's going to help you. The only person that can really help you is yourself. And I guess I can remember leaving in 2005, and things like resettlement and transition. I can remember going on holiday to Magaluf with my friends, which meant me missing 4 weeks of doing sort of transition courses, which was probably a reflection of why I didn't last too long in civilian life. But the moment I joined the second time, I'd enrolled on, because I had no qualifications, I wanted to do a degree in security and risk management, and because I had no qualifications, I had to enroll on a foundation degree, which meant doing an 18-month program before I could even get onto the bachelor degree course, which I did in my own time. And having left the military the second time with a foundation degree, a bachelor's degree, and more recently a master's degree, that opened up so many other avenues. Typically you don't see too many junior NCOs who would carry those sort of academic qualifications. As you know, it would normally be an officer who's come from a stronger educated background, perhaps. So to be a junior NCO with on-the-ground experience combined with that academic understanding and critical thinking, it opened up so many more avenues. And I guess the key message would be that you get out what you put in, sort of thing. And it was hard work, and it was very difficult to get through those courses, be under no illusion. But the rewards at the end of it have been significant for me personally.
So when you left the armed forces, what was second time round? What was the sort of path you took?
Yeah, the path I took, it was quite strange actually, because I got injured actually in my second stint in the military, and it restricted my career path. Although I wasn't injured in a sense where I could be medically discharged, I was injured in a sense that it would put me into an administration stream. Sort of the stores, the armories, and all those jobs that no one really wants to do unless they have to, sort of thing, if you're a soldier. And I can remember I got put as the commanding officer's driver, who is ironically now the managing director of the largest security company in the world. And this colonel at the time, I'd been driving him for a year, and he knew my sort of personal story. He knew that I was a soldier at heart. You know, I'd been working in a reconnaissance troop for a lot of my career in the military. So doing sort of what I would call proper soldiering, and he was sort of sympathetic to my case, the commanding officer. And I remember one day getting a call off a friend back home in Blackpool in 2009, and it was just when this Somali sort of piracy phenomenon had just sort of kicked off, and we saw this huge increase in vessels being hijacked in the Indian Ocean. And I got a phone call off a friend who was an ex-Royal Marine, and he said, Jordan, do you want to come and join me on a ship? I need a guy. Someone's dropped out. Can you jump on this ship next week? And obviously I said, I'm in the army. Obviously, there's no chance they're going to let me out in a week. And very fortunate that I've been driving this particular senior officer around for a year. He said, Jordan, I know you've worked hard to try and fight this case. And I took my personal case of wanting to prove my fitness level to the head of the army, the CGS, and unfortunately it was rejected on medical grounds. And essentially what I was trying to do is take the course to be a sergeant, the sort of junior command course which you need to promote to sergeant. And they were saying that I couldn't carry weight because of a back injury, and to try and carry weight would basically put further pressure and injure myself more, even though I believe that I could still pass the tests. They were saying that the doctors were saying, no, you can't sort of continue with this. So they put me in a dead-end job, and they said, you can stay in the army, but your career path will be very slow. But the colonel knew that I wasn't sort of a bluffer or a cuffer, if you like, and one of these who was just a passenger in the army, who was happy to take a wage for sitting in a storeroom. And actually, he helped me get out of the army fast track, and he got me out of the army within 2 weeks, which, you know, I think when you look back in life, you can sort of see those junctions where critical decisions were made, and they helped you, whether that's in your personal or professional life. And that's one that always stands out in my mind, that particular commanding officer, he's become a good friend, actually. He helped me out a lot, and actually, if he didn't let me go and process my release early, you know, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, because it was sort of my first rung on the ladder into a new world of maritime security, which is what I've been doing for, you know, the last 10 years now.
That's kind of like is it Steve Jobs that says you can only connect the dots going backwards? So yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. Yeah, and your story makes sense there. So it's along the way, it's important not to burn any bridges, and just making all the right connections, working hard, and at some point in some stage of your life, it will come back and you'll prevail from it, which is exactly what you've done, really. So, this... Go on, mate, yeah.
So, yeah, I was just going to say that, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can look back, but I also think you have to be prepared to make the sacrifices. I think a lot of people, and I was certainly one of them the first time, I think you leave the army, you think, you know, I've done my tours, I've got lots of experience, I've got a few qualifications and what have you, but actually that isn't enough. The world is so competitive out there, and especially for the security industry, which naturally a lot of former military personnel go into. It's the most competitive industry in the world for former servicemen and women, this private security sector. So, you know, having if you've served in Iraq, Afghanistan, you might have a lot of experience. You might even have a very senior rank. It doesn't. You need a bit more than that these days, is what I'm trying to say. You know, and I think that's where having some academic qualifications, or even having specialist courses that you might do in the army, things like invaluable skills in the security sector, like medical skills, like linguistic skills, you know, or UAVs, cyber security, all these emerging sort of areas and markets are skills that I would encourage any service leaver who's still in the military to start exploring right now.
Excellent. And this line of work led to your recent book, Citadel. What's the book about? Obviously, it's about the piracy and like the maritime security. But you encountered. I mean, I've not had the privilege of reading the book myself yet, but from what I can tell, you encountered some sort of things that were on par with Captain Phillips, like the American version?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm going to get you a book sent out to you after this interview, Jamie. So we'll make sure you get a copy of that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And what I'll do as well for your listeners is I'll send you a second copy that you can give out maybe as a prize or a gift to one of your followers.
That's extremely kind of you. Thank you.
No problem. So I think the book itself, it's Citadel, and the subtitle, The Story of One Man's War Against the Pirates of Somalia. It's exactly my personal journey, really, and the things that I experienced and the way I saw things. Everybody has a different view and a different take, but I guess I'm one of the few people who sort of started right at the bottom in the industry as an operator on a ship, just like a normal team member. Got a couple of years of experience in the height of piracy, and then sort of progressed through the ranks as a team leader, an ops manager, director of operations, to then starting up my own business in the field, supporting those sort of operations, and which is what I do now, running a consultancy. And I had lots of I met lots of very professional people, a few cowboys as well along the way, as you expect. But we had some good times out there, and I learned a lot again about private security operations, but also more importantly, a lot about myself and what was important in life and what my sort of values were. But we had some interesting incidents. That the book itself focuses on a particular story, the title Citadel. For those who perhaps don't know what a citadel is, this is essentially a safe room on the vessel. The name comes from hundreds of years ago when the villages around the UK in times of war, they would have a refuge, an area that people could seek refuge in a crisis or an emergency, perhaps a bunker or a safe place, and that's the concept of a citadel. It's a safe room. And on this particular occasion, we were unarmed. A lot of people ask, why were you unarmed? What's the point of security if you're unarmed? So I'll answer that one quite quickly. And the reason is that in the international shipping industry, every vessel in the world carries a flag. And the flag that hangs off the back of the ship, basically is the country that the ship is registered to. And as on land, every country in the world has different laws. And if you were stood on a British flagship, for example, that would be essentially the same as standing in the centre of London. The laws would be quite similar. You would be stood on a piece of British territory, so you have to adhere to the laws and legislation of that land. So as you can imagine, some countries of the world don't allow firearms just to be sort of used on their territory. So we were I found myself on a job off Somalia where we didn't have any weapons. We had very limited resources, and I say resources, I mean things like razor wire, steel, sort of anything we could use on board to make it as difficult as possible for the pirates to board the ship. Like you would have seen on the Captain Phillips, things like the fire hoses, lots of different techniques and tactics you can use to try and slow the pirates down using what we would call a layered defence system, which would be based on a risk assessment of the vessel. I was very fortunate to work on the Captain Phillips film. We filmed that in Malta quite a few years ago now, so it was good to share my experiences with the production guys at Sony Pictures and work with them. But this story, the pirates got on board, and we were stuck with some serious decisions to make because we were unarmed. We had a crew to look after, and we needed to make sure that the vessel, the crew, and the cargo wasn't hijacked and taken to Somalia. So I won't tell the listeners what happened next because that will spoil the book. But we had to make some serious decisions, and the book talks about the decisions that we have to make and the concept of sometimes you have to break the rules. And certainly something that soldiers and veterans will understand is that actually we work to standard operating procedures in most aspects of our military operations or our lives or our businesses these days. But sometimes we come to scenarios that perhaps we have SOPs for, but actually the scenarios that we face aren't standard, so we can't apply standard procedures to non-standard scenarios. So I talk a lot about how we have to sometimes break the rules of convention and take a different path in times of crisis. So hopefully some lessons that people can take from the book, hopefully. But we also have a few incidents with the pirates. I was involved in dropping ransoms off in Somalia, indirectly, sort of facilitating the deliveries and things. So there is some interesting stories in there about that side of the business. We also talk about the Chennai Six, which you'll see have been released now after the great work of the families and the campaign team. So there's a lot of good stories there that I'm sure a lot of service leavers, veterans, and those serving in the military would be able to relate to. I think there's a bit for everybody in there without plugging it too much.
I really look forward to reading that. I can't believe that you're on these ships without any weapons. Now, you said about how so the flag that hangs off the back of the ship denotes really what country you're from, and those laws of that country are to be abided on that ship. So, do the enemy, so to speak, i.e. the Somalian pirates, do they understand that? Are they aware that that ship has that flag, they know that it's going to be unarmed? So, does it make you vulnerable having these flags marking where you're from?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think one of the things that we learned sort of quite early on is that the pirates aren't as daft as we think, so to speak, and they had very strong intelligence networks. Using not just only, in this day and age, you can jump on the internet and you can find out where any ship in the world is pretty much using sort of GPS and AIS websites. AIS, the automatic identification systems, sort of a beacon that's given out from the ship to give its position, mainly for safety and collision purposes. But as you know, with these sort of things, they have a security sensitive aspect, and I'm under no illusion that the pirates were running their projects, operations like they were with military precision, if you like, in terms of their communications planning, their crisis management, their attacks, their tactics. They were, as the years progressed, they become very, very slick operators, and that was no surprise when they started hijacking vessels and extracting ransoms of in excess of $10-15 million, from 4 17-year-old pirates getting on a ship with no educational qualifications or real prospects in life. I think it'd be fair to say, to extracting a $15 million ransom 4 months later is serious business, and that's what Somali piracy was. It was a business, unlike some of the other piracy that we see in the world, which is perhaps closely linked to terrorism and armed criminals and gangs and other aspects, whereas the Somali pirate was often always a business model where they would hijack the vessel, take the crew, and if they got what they wanted, i.e. the ransom payment, that the crew would be released unharmed. Unfortunately, it wasn't always as simple as that, and people did get injured, killed, and those who were hijacked often suffered psychological impacts, a bit like a soldier perhaps would do returning from a war zone. The PTSD and things, seafarers are incredible people, and they have some of the same challenges, especially when they've been dealing with pirates.
I'll take my hats off to you and those who work in that industry, mate. It sounds very challenging, not to say the least, and also not the work itself, but you say about when they return from operating out there, they may well have PTSD in that. Now, getting receiving that sort of mental health issues and PTSD from that line of work, I imagine, would you fall under the same bracket of support system that veterans would do?
When I talk about the psychological impact, of the guys working at sea, I'm more probably referring to the seafarers on the ship. So, in terms of the sort of risk and the danger, I don't think, although there were some pretty close moments, certainly when the pirates were on board, being unarmed is a very different scenario, but most of the jobs were armed. It was in the early days, because most of what you have to understand also, I think, is that most of the countries that didn't allow weapons changed their regulations as they started to understand the piracy threat. So even the UK, I think in 2009, they didn't allow weapons on ships. By 2012, all UK vessels were allowed to carry weapons, because at the time David Cameron changed the laws and the legislation to allow that, because he saw that obviously it was one of the only ways to deter the piracy threat. But I think the real victims of piracy, away from the sort of the ex-military guys, the real victims for me are the seafarers, the people who work at sea 9-10 months a year. People forget that more than 90% of world trade is still done on the ocean today, which is a phenomenal amount of everything we see, certainly in the UK. If we think of the phones that we use, the TVs that we watch, the clothes we wear, the food we eat, all this comes across the ocean, the cars we drive. In its lifespan, from production, from to get into its consumer, it will come across the ocean at some stage, and not many people really see that, because the first we see is when we're in Tesco or Asda, we buy it off the shelf, or we're in the sports shop or on the car forecourt. That's when we first see something, but that's took a long time to get there, weeks, months, and without these seafarers who are incredibly special people, they make the world go round, and it's quite one of the things I found about the seafarer was it's a bit of a thankless task, because nobody really knows what you do. It's just something that happens in the world, and we take it for granted, and until it really affects you or a family member, no one really appreciates what these guys go through, and I have so much respect for these guys, and our job in comparison is quite easy, if I'm being very honest, because we're very highly trained, former British military personnel. We normally got extensive experience in hostile environments, so we're used to danger and risk. Whereas a seafarer, they didn't sign up for that. They didn't sign up to be for their vessel to be getting RPGs and AK fire shot at them. Whereas we know those risks and we accept those, and that's the business that we're in, and that's why we're paid to protect those ships. But the seafarer is very innocent in that whole sort of operation, if you like.
And you speak about how there's things going on in the world that maybe we're not so aware of back here in the UK, but that leads me to asking you about the Chennai Six, because there's a little bit of a political issue there, where 6 contractors, guys that are doing protective work in the circuit, who were locked away really for something that was out of their hands. And as far as I'm aware, you were the ambassador campaigning for their release, and thank God they were released just before Christmas last year. And can you tell us a little bit about Chennai Six, just to sort of inform those?
Yeah, so the Chennai Six, they were, I'm sure probably a lot of veterans are familiar with the Chennai Six case. The last 12 months had a lot of coverage, certainly in the sort of military and maritime communities. And essentially, these guys were doing the job that I talk about in the book Citadel, and they were former military guys. 6 British servicemen, 4 from the Parachute Regiment, 2 from the Yorkshire Regiment, and they were guys who, like most of us, were veterans. They'd done the time. They had about, I think, combined service. They had 74 years combined exemplary service. These had all served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Northern Ireland, Kosovo, Bosnia. They were, they had very strong profiles, ranging from private soldier all the way up to sergeant major. There was a wealth of experience within those 6 guys, and they were caught up working for a company that obviously afterwards, looking back in hindsight, were probably not a good company to work for. In fact, definitely weren't a good company to work for without mentioning any names. And these guys, I think there was in fact, on that point, there's a big lesson here that we can all look back and take from the Chennai Six case, is when you enter the private sector, security sector, or for that matter, just the private sector after the military, it highlights for me the importance of perhaps doing more due diligence on the company you're going to work for, especially if you're going to go into a hostile, complex or remote environment, because when you normally only find out about what your company's all about when things go wrong, which is obviously what happened with the Chennai Six, because they didn't get any support from the moment they were arrested by the American security company that they worked for. So the Chennai Six, they were on what's called a floating armory. They were waiting for a vessel to come along, which then they would board as security operators and then provide protection, which hundreds of people, thousands in fact, are doing still today. I've been in the business of floating armories for quite a few years, and that's a service that we provide or did provide for a long time. So they wouldn't have known much about it when they were picked up and arrested. They were probably sat in their cabins reading a book or whatever, and all of a sudden the vessels had been called into port because it's been asked to by the Indian authorities, and they were misled in many respects, because they got taken. They thought they were going for some routine checks, medical checkups and things, and all of a sudden they found themselves locked in a prison cell where lots of ins and outs and controversial points in the case. It's very complex, but ultimately these guys spent 4 years in India. 2.5 years plus in a jail cell, and they missed 4 Christmases, and it was an absolute tragedy, because the families, even more so for these guys, families were literally torn apart, relationship broke down, houses repossessed. You couldn't, you couldn't even imagine what these people have gone through, absolute turmoil. And I was approached about sort of halfway through the case, maybe 2 years in. I'd always followed the case, and the families approached me and said sort of, is there any way you could help us and reach out using your network in the industry, in maritime sector, the maritime organisations, and see if we can sort of get some traction. And obviously it was an honour to be asked to represent these guys as an ambassador, and I work with the families closely, and we come up with some sort of innovative ideas by making a film production and trying to raise as much awareness as possible to get more signatures for Downing Street, for the petition, and just speaking at events. And I think awareness was the key, and in the end I guess justice prevailed, and we ended up getting them out there in the end. And a lot of people did a lot of work, from Stephen Askins, who was a former Royal Marine, he's now a maritime lawyer, all the families that were involved, particular Lisa Dunn, Joanne and Yvonne, the partners and the sisters of the guys. And yeah, I spoke to some of the guys recently, Nick Dunn and Ray Tyndall and Billy Irvin, and they're just delighted to be home back with their loved ones, and it's just great to see. And I think for them now, it's not about sort of dwelling on the past. They've lost 4 years of their life, and they need to move forward now and start embracing. And I think if there's anybody out there as well, these guys are all looking for jobs and employment, because it's tough times for them still, regardless of them being free. The reality is now that they need to find jobs, they need to find homes. So maybe a shout out there, if there is anyone who wants to speak to the Chennai Six, I can certainly link them in, because they're good guys, professional guys, and they were caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, working for the wrong company, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think the transition from the armed forces to civilian world is hard enough, geez, these guys now have to reintegrate back into civilian life, try and pick up this mess that's at home, because they've not been able to administrate it whilst obviously being locked up overseas. I just can't believe that the government let this run for 4 years without really pressing on and getting our guys home. It took fellow veterans like yourself and your community and your network to get them home. It's, if it wasn't for you guys and the families campaigning, would they have ever got home? That's the question that we're left with.
I don't know the answers to that. It's, I think, as I say, I've spent a lot of personal time as well, as have many people, and even more so the families, sort of analysing the what ifs and hows and whens and whys. But I think it is what it is, as we often say. And the most important thing is that they're home now. If I was them, obviously I would be looking at possibly further action against the people who employed me, who didn't support me and got me into that situation. But again, that's, as I say, they perhaps don't want to dwell on the past. They want to move forward and start getting on with their lives now.
No, I wish them the best of luck, and they deserve now to just at least carry on with their lives. So, if ambassador of the Chennai Six campaign wasn't enough, you're also trying to press on with another campaign, which is called Running Dangerously. I mean, it's sort of in the title itself. It sounds dangerous. What is Running Dangerously?
So Running Dangerously is a project that I came up with towards the end of last year, when we found out the Chennai Six were going to be released and things. I've always tried and done a large charity campaign each year to try and support people who are perhaps less fortunate than us. The Chennai Six in 2017 took up a lot of time travelling, speaking at conferences and raising money as well. I did a 10k run in India to raise money for the families to go and fly there, and not that I got the running book, because I'm certainly not a runner by any means, although I need to start being one soon. I thought I'm going to do something that nobody's done before, something very different, and I'm going to combine the experience that I've gained in life and also the experiences that have touched me over the years, and try and put them into a project. And what I wanted to do was, I found that having a daughter myself who's 8 years old, education is so important for children. But as a former soldier, I'm working in the private security sector. I meet a lot of children in the world who don't have education, don't have access to education, and not only that, don't have access to even more basic things like clean water or fresh food. So three of the countries that I've worked in that had always touched me were Iraq, Afghanistan and Somalia. And the people that I met there were incredibly kind people, and people who deserve more from life. And I thought that what I could do was try and raise some awareness of the children in these countries by raising some money to educate some children, and also raising awareness of the effects of conflict on a child's life, because we have to remember that the children are the victims here. They get brought into this world. They don't know any better. They're not soldiers. They're not here to fight. They can't fend for themselves. And a lot of these children that I've certainly met and spoke to in schools and hostels and things are, not in schools, but in hostels and in orphanages, is the word I was looking for. They don't have families. They've lost their parents as a result of conflict. So for me, it's a very important project to get involved in. I've got a fellow veteran who's working with me called Rick Webb, who I worked with Rick in Iraq 10 years ago, and Rick lost a leg, unfortunately, in Afghanistan about 5 years ago, and Rick is now running a fitness company called Rick Webb Fitness, and he is supporting me on the project, trying to get me in best shape and burn off the Christmas puddings and all that good stuff. So it's an exciting project. We've got quite a lot of interest from the media. We're going to be doing some interviews with the BBC, BFBS, Forces News, and we're going to be documenting it as well. There's going to be a documentary that will come out later this year, towards the end of the year, when we hopefully finish 3 of the events, where I'll do a minimum of a 10k, a half marathon, and a marathon in Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. So we have a Just Giving page. So if anyone's out there and they feel that they want to support one of the charities, we're raising money for War Child, UNICEF, and the Darlington Foundation. So yeah, please do get behind it. Even if you just share or tweet or like, even if you can't make a donation, anything is much appreciated.
And I'll proudly put that link in this podcast somewhere. I'll link it on our website for you.
That's excellent, very kind, thank you.
No, my hat's off to you again. It's something, running dangerously. You could be running through Somalia and these other countries. I think that's you're crazy, but it's a good crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a fine line between being crazy and very intelligent. I'm probably just bang in the middle at the moment.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, Jordan. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it. And I wish you a very successful year. I wish you all of success with running dangerously. And again, best of luck to you.
No, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Much appreciated. I think you're doing a great job with the Veterans Network, and I'm sure you will have lots of support growing as the year progresses. But I hope all veterans out there keep safe and have a great 2018. And thanks again for your support. Much appreciated.
That was Mr. Jordan Wiley, a very experienced veteran and conducting really inspirational work. Just an all-round decent bloke, really. I'm really looking forward to reading his book, Citadel, and hopefully we will be giving a couple away for free in the near future. If you're not one of the lucky ones to receive a copy of Citadel, it's available on Amazon. Jordan is a very courageous man, and of course will be running dangerously through Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia to raise funds and awareness for children who are unfortunately victims of conflict. Please visit his Just Giving page to find out more, and I'm sure he would appreciate any kind donations to the cause. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed the Veterans Network podcast. For more podcasts and blogs, just visit www.veteransnetwork.co.uk. And if you're a veteran-owned business, please feel free to list your business on our free business directory to reap the benefits that so many others are already doing so. Goodbye for now.